let's get to it. So, let's run through this as quick as we can. Darlington, I found this interesting. The last 21 races, 16 of those 21, the winner started outside the top five. So we just talked about qualifying and practice. Sometimes it matters, sometimes it doesn't. This is the perfect example where it really doesn't matter. So
No, and this is a track where we talked kind of like a Richmond, when I said Homestead. It's short run speed means nothing. Qualifying is 1, 2 laps basically. You got to get going and then take the green, then you come around and take the checkered. That's basically one hard lap that you're doing. The race is what 293, I think, this weekend. So it's a longer. When the tires are going to fall off, I mean, there's as big of a 3-4 second difference, which is like 12 to 15 miles an hour by the time starting your run and maybe the middle of the run. It's a huge difference. So that's why qualifying doesn't mean a whole lot, because some of the guys that qualify, since it's an impound race, they might qualify. Well, I'm going to go for track position. I'm going to go on short run pace. So they might start off good, where other guys might say, hey, you know what? It's a long race. I'm going to go ahead and qualify my race setup because I know we're probably good on fall off compared to the guys in front of me that might fall off quicker. So that's the kind of games you play. And usually the guys starting outside the top 10, usually they might be slower on short run bursts, but they're good on long run. And that's why you see trends like that.
yeah, it's not as, and we talked about this before. It was a lot more important a few years ago than it is now. It's relevant, but not as. And also Chevy, when Eric Jones won the race, the last race last year, he was the first Chevy driver to win at Darlington since 2014. Now that's important because we do only care about kind of the last two races more than anything. And so that kind of brings Chevy back into the fold as far as, all right, well, they're having a great year. Well, I'm not going to look at them differently just because they've had just one winner since 2014.
Yeah, and the trend I found too, I was looking at this season, just lap sleds, just in general, run up front, Ford. They've led 50.8% of all their laps this year were accounted for on the three super speedways. So Daytona, Talladega, Atlanta. They led 122 laps in Daytona, 221 in Atlanta, and 88 more in Talladega. You take out the 296 laps led in Martinsville, which is Martinsville, nothing really comparable to this. They've led a combined 121 laps everywhere else. That tells you they're not really leading a lot of laps on kind of intermediate tracks like this package is going to be.
Okay.
They haven't won a lot in Darlington lately. Toyota's been the one. They led 164 laps on these two tracks. Chevrolet, 351 laps as far as like intermediate, mile and a half tracks. Kansas, Vegas, that kind of stuff. Then you look at the finishing order. Ford had one guy in the top 10 last weekend. So I think this is more of a Toyota versus Chevy race. Granted, the Ford and Logano won this race last year. You look at how everything's progressed since that point. I think it's more of a Toyota Chevrolet battle this weekend.
Now, did you notice anything at all different last year with the new cars, with the track? Because the track, again, historically, pretty much a boring racetrack. Not a whole lot goes on. Pit strategy, very important, especially with the high line, which is aggravating. So this is one of those things where if people have, and we talked about this a month or so ago, if you're having a debate on whether or not they should go back to single file restarts, you don't need to worry about that at Darlington, because if you start on the bottom, you're in trouble.
You are. Yeah, it's the top lane is the fast lane around here. Now, Harvick runs a little bit different line. He gets kind of closer to the dotted line. Granted, it's not low, but it's kind of that lower lane of the top lane. You'll know what I'm talking about through the dotted line in Darlington. But most other guys will run that top lane. That's the fast way around this track. And it's gonna be tire fall off as always. Nothing really changes. I thought last year looked a lot like years past because it was all about tire fall off, maintaining that pit strategy, make sure you don't screw up in the pits. It just looked the same both races. So,
and by the way, that's why I wanted to take a look at the pit. And I sent you that email because I was taking a look. I found a website that seemed to do a pretty good job of putting stats together for pit road success or lack thereof. I don't know if you had an opportunity to look at it, but
I haven't yet.
It looked like a pretty good site. It looked like they knew what they were talking about. And then I looked at another one that was more like a modern, like a top site that just talked about, this is what these cars have done this season on these types of tracks, something like that. or something else that at least I saw similar type drivers. So I was like, all right, maybe they are saying the right things because this other big site seems to be using the same drivers. I thought it was interesting. The driver at the top of the list is Eric Jones. Apparently, according to this site, they got the best pit crew so far this season. So the reason I wanted to look at that is, again, because the pit crew is going to be important this week.
Very much so.
And
very.
Yeah. So, all right. So quickly, let's get into that. And we only had one similar driver that we all picked. One. He would be considered a top contender.
Larson?
No. I'm the only one that did not take Larson.
Truex?
No, I'm the only one who did not take Truex. I went through the strategy again of eliminating those first several drivers.
First several? So that tells me then Chastain?
You're the only one who didn't take him.
I'm trying to think if this guy's that next little it's got to be that next little group right there then. Gosh, who was the other one? I'm trying to think of who else was in that little bit of you gonna say, is it Bell?
No. Wow. No, you're getting Bell. Like everybody but.
I get all around him.
There's only two left.
Hamlin. That's what I said. Reddick?
Oh, you missed it. It's the only one left now.
Did I say Hamlin?
No, but I don't have him. No, he was all the way at. Remember, I didn't take.
Byron.
Actually, CJ didn't even take Hamlin.
Is it Byron?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know why I skipped over him. I got my page here, and I got Hamlin, Byron, Bell, right? And I just missed the middle one. But yeah, Byron.
Yeah, so William Byron, that's the one. And yeah, because you look at Larson and Hamlin, they're both 5-1. Hamlin would have to come back and win again. That's very difficult to do. He was second last year out of 2 races, which is nice. Led 42 laps in the other, which is nice. 4 wins, that's all nice. I can understand it, but 5-1's a short number. Same thing for Larson because he's too unpredictable this season. In his last 6 races, he's been either first or second or in the 30s. And this year, he's got 5 top 5s with 5 finishes of 29th or worse. I mean, I can't take a driver that you could just flip a coin and go, okay, is he going to be in the 30s this week or is he going to be contending for a win? I'm not taking that guy at 5-1. I should just put it that way.
He was difficult because I was saying, one of my man, he's either really good or really bad. And it looks, he's got 5 races where he's had no issues. And he's got 2 wins, 2 runner-ups, and a 4th in those races. And I also went a little bit deeper. Those are, if you look at races that he's done well on, they're playoff tracks this year. And this is a playoff track. And in the 4 races on playoff tracks this season, he's got an average finish of 2.25.
Okay.
So I'm like, all right, he seems to rise to the occasion under playoff tracks.
We'll have to keep that in locked away after this week's race.
Yep, and so I looked at what he did. Now, last year he blew an engine with 36, 12th in the Southern 500. I think something happened to him then too. But prior to that, he had 3 straight runner-ups and 2 third-place finishes in a 3-race span. He's led a lot of laps there, and the only thing he's missing is a win. I thought 5-1 was steep, but it's like I need to get a win back, so like I'm just gonna have to take him, and I'm just gonna roll the playoff track.
I would actually take Larson over Hamlin myself if I was choosing between the two.
Yeah, and Hamlin, the odds of winning. The thing with him that struck me that was hard with him was winning 2 in a row. Hard to do in NASCAR these days. And he was complaining about his pit crew just a week ago. And he just won this race. Granted, it wasn't because of his pit crew. We're talking about a lot of pit stops on Sunday. And it's just a lot of opportunities for them to mess it up on pit road. So that 5-1 was tough with that.
That's true.
And you look at 9 top 10s in the last 12 there, 8 of them in the top 5. He's been so good there overall. I just like, do you take him? Do you not? 3 top 5s in the last 4 weeks. He's starting to figure it out. Maybe his pit crew will get better. So it was hard to separate those two because they each have had their issues this year. That's what makes it so difficult this year compared to a few years ago. Was every one of them you have to list the pros and cons box. For a few years ago, it was just a bunch of pros. There wasn't many cons. Now you're just kind of picking your poison with them. It's just who do you want to think it's going to not have the bad week this week when they're all capable of having it.
Yep. Truex is next at 7-1, and Reddick at 8-1. 8-1. I did play Reddick, not Truex. Truex last year did lead laps, 28 and 48, but had a wreck and a water pump issue. Before that, he did lead 248 laps, dominated into the 2021 win, one of his two, which is really nice. But again, this is almost like me. I'm 2 out of 3 races, and Reddick, meanwhile, it hasn't won in a while. I am concerned with how as bad as his pit crew has apparently been this year. That does concern me. But second and third last year, I know it was on a different car, but it is what it is. And he also did pretty well in the Xfinity Series on this track. So that's why I went with Reddick over Truex.
Yeah, they're both, I feel like, solid plays, too, because Truex, he's got 4 top 8 finishes in the last 5 weeks. He hadn't won in the previous 7. You can always tell they're turning around, too. And Toyota last year, even in the spring race that Logano won, Toyota, bar none, was the better manufacturer. At one point, I think they had the entire top 5. And then towards late in the race, I think 5 or 6 of the Toyota cars were in the top 8. And remember, they all pretty much wrecked off turn 2 on a restart, which is what caught Truex out. That's why his finish was indicative of how strong of a car he had. That's why I also put a lot of stock in Reddick this week, because as you said, second and third last year, that wasn't with this Toyota car. Now you're giving him a Toyota car. We know what Reddick can do at Homestead, one of his best tracks. That's another reason I should have said with Larson. He dominated Homestead last year.
Yes.
And this track is just like that. Very similar. So I feel like Reddick's the biggest bargain out of all those guys you just mentioned, because you're getting better odds. And this track to him is just like Larson at Homestead. I just feel like it's so similar, and you're getting 3 points lower for him. So this could be his race to lose this weekend, giving him Toyota power.
Yeah, just taking a look there, last year, Larson won last year, as you mentioned, but Chastain was second, which I'm happy about since I have him. And I also have Dillon, and he finished 4th at Homestead last year, so I guess I'm happy about that as well. All right, then you have Kyle at 9-1. Nobody took Kyle. He has a pretty good history here, but only 1 win. And last 3 races, crash, engine. That's all bad luck at 9-1. And then Byron also at 9-1, as we mentioned. We all have him, so I'm going big time on Byron. I put 30 down on him. The pit crew's also been very good this year. He's coming on again. He's trending in the right direction. He led 24 and 50 laps in the races last year. So I think it's a good combination that he seems to be a lot better now at Darlington with the new car, and he is trending back in the right direction.
Yeah, Byron's the play out of those two. In each of the last 4 weeks, he's improved the season. 23rd to 7th, 7th to 4th, 4th to 3rd. Seems like that's kind of looks for like a win. He should have won last year. Remember, Logano pushed him out of the way on the last lap or second to last lap. Also on playoff tracks this year, again, same with Larson, Byron's finish is 7th. He's got 2 wins and a 3rd place finish in those races.
Okay.
So he's performing on tracks like that. Kyle, I don't understand how he's been 16-1 and 18-1 the last couple of weeks, and drop him to 9-1.
Yeah, I know.
And you look at the season, the only exception, he's finished 14th or worse in 5 of the last 6 weeks, including 4 of the last 5 being 21st or worse. The only exception is Talladega win, but he led 3 laps that day. He's finished 14th or worse in 5 of the last 6, 4 of the last 5 being 21st or worse overall. It's like, how does that go to a driver that goes from 16-1 to 9-1? Like, I'm going to fade him on that, even though he has the car that I just said that Reddick finished the top 3 in. Kyle just doesn't seem like a top 3 car.
At 9-1, that's the problem.
9-1, no. 16-1, I would have taken him. 9-1, not a shot.
Bell 10-1, Chastain 11-1. So again, you took Bell. CJ and I went with Chastain. You got the points leader, as you mentioned. Again, the pit crew's done well. If you take a look at his last several races there, now his 3rd place finish in September of 21, I believe, I didn't do the research, but it had to be the best race of his career prior to the switch to the new cars, because he never had that type of results before that. So that's a good sign. Last year, crashed in this race, led 26 laps. And he also had a runner-up in one of the Xfinity Series races, leading over 100 laps there in 7 races. So he had some success there as well. And he's doing pretty good. 2nd and 5th in his last 2 races. So I felt Chastain was a good way to go. You went with Bell, though. So why'd you go with Bell?
Well, I feel, again, the Toyota power. I just feel like Toyota's right now probably the power to beat this weekend. Started 3rd and 2nd, finished 6th and 5th last year. So he started up front, finished up front. You just feel like he's about to break back out again. He just seems like his speed's getting there. He's got a little bit of bad luck, but it happens to everybody, it seems like. I just felt all in on Toyota. That's why I kept going to Toyota guys. Ross, he's a good play. Again, I just didn't have enough money left to get him because of everybody else up front. The only thing that scared me is he's been running well. He just doesn't look like he has race winning speed yet. That's the only thing. I feel like he's a solid top 5, but does he have what it takes to break that bubble and get in the top 2? Hendrick should be good here. Larson and Byron. Their playoff track trends seem to kind of fall into it. The 4 Gibbs cars I expect good at it. So there's 6 cars right there. Can he break that bubble? That's the only thing. And without enough money to wager his way, that's why I faded him. I still think he's a strong play, but I just didn't have enough money left to get him when Bell seemed to be the safer bet. Plus, he was plus 3,000 last year for Bell. So his odds really went down. So they see something out of him.
12-1. We have Elliott and Harvick. And CJ put money on both. I just put money on Harvick. You passed on both of them. The only reason I was thinking about taking Elliott was, I'm getting 12-1 with Chase Elliott. So that's unusual, especially the fact that he's like, the 8th best driver odds-wise. That's very unusual. Yeah. And he was 5th in this race last year. He had a win in the Xfinity Series back in 2014, even though he hasn't won yet in the Cup Series. But look, he's 12-1 for a reason. He hasn't, as we said last week, it's just not happening yet. Harvick, meanwhile, I went with Harvick, 4th in this race last year, had an exhaust issue after that in the 2nd race, and that broke a race streak of 13 straight in the top 10. And that's the reason why I went with Harvick. He's dominated this track before with 13 top 5s and 3 wins. And I'm just kind of feeling, Martin Truex won. Denny Hamlin won. Maybe this is Kevin Harvick's week.
This is a veteran-type track. I do like Harvick better than Elliott. Chase, I thought his odds are pretty good for a Chase Elliott. But if you look, he's 0 for 12 at Darlington. He's never won at Homestead. He's never won at Fontana. He's not good he's never won at Atlanta before their repave. It took a repave and reconfiguration. So on aged tracks, he doesn't win that. And so I thought, that and 4 of his last 6 finishes, he's seen him finish 20th or worse. He still isn't getting top 5 since he's been back. You still can kind of notice that. So I'm like, 12-1 is probably where he should be, but I'll fade on him. Harvick is interesting because if you look at, he's a night and day difference between driving for RCR and SHR there. And RCR, 17 starts at Darlington, 63 total laps led. Since he joined Stewart-Haas, 13 starts, 750 laps led. So this is his track. You feel like a veteran should do well there. The only thing that held me back from him, he has 1 top 5 finish in the last 8 weeks, and he's never finished better than 5th all season. Granted, I think the next gen's proven anything can happen, but that scared me a little bit we're not only asking him to finish better than 5th, we're asking him to get 4 spots better than 5th. And we talked about how good the Toyota guys are, the Hendrick guys should be outside of Chase Elliott. So I felt, he's a great play if you can get him for a top 5 finish, a top 10 even on some books, but an outright win, I just kind of faded him for that reason.
All right. Next up, we have Logano at 14-1 and his teammate Blaney at 22-1. Logano, look, I took Logano same way I was thinking of Elliott just because of the odds, and I just went with Logano at 14-1 because I said, I'm getting 14-1 on the defending champ of the race, who led 107 laps from the pole. He was 4th in the 2nd race with 64 laps from the pole. So, that's a nice combination here last year, as good as, probably better than any driver last year. And the 171 laps he led last year, keep that in mind because he led 122 laps in his first 16 races with the other car. So the new car and Joey Logano at Darlington really seemed to work. And I'm getting 14-1. So I had to go with Logano. And Blaney, this is just one of those tracks that you pass on him at. I still think he'll probably do better than people think because that's kind of what he's done. What scared me away from just going with him was that 16th at Kansas. As we said before, he seems to be a streaky driver. And I don't want that to be the start of like 2 or 3 races in a row outside the top 10.
Yeah, this is not – it doesn't matter, I feel like, what his odds were this week. I just wasn't going to take Blaney with 1 top 10 and 12 tries, 17th to 13th last year. And as you said, wasn't in the top 15 last week.
And it's strange, too, because he actually did well in the Xfinity Series at this track. But
yeah, just it doesn't suit him. And Penske always had better cars than everybody in that series, too, so when they were out there running. So it was hard to translate that to Cup when everybody's good. And Logano, is the factor what I said earlier about the Fords, they just seem to be down in power as far as their – I don't know if it's horsepower, I don't know if it's handling or what, but on higher speed tracks, not of drafting tracks, just an outright pace, they just don't seem to have it. Now, granted, Logano would be the top guy. He was a top Ford finisher last week in Kansas. So, like you said, he had good stacks there. I went more all in the Toyota camp still rather than faded some of those Fords. But he's not a bad play for his odds where he's at.
All right. And then you have Wallace at 28-1, Suarez at 45-1. Wallace was 4th last week, 2nd top 10 in his last 4, 9th in one of the races last year. So that's interesting. Suarez still not getting a good feel for him. So yeah, I just if I was going to take one of the two, I would take Wallace.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, Suarez just 5 of his last 7 races, I've seen him finish 18th or worse. 8 of his last 9, and that's at Darlington. 8 of his last 9 of the season, he's finished 15th or worse. So he's not doing enough for me to worth taking him even at his odds. Bubba, yeah, it's 9th last year, Southern 500, top 10 last week, Toyota Power. The only factor is he has 1 top 10 in his career at Darlington. That's what kind of scared me away from him a little bit. Do I think he's going to go out and win? Darlington, I just don't see it. If you could get him for a top 10 play, to bet him that way, that's probably your better look than an outright win for him.
All right. And then as far as the rest of the long shots, I went with Keselowski at 50-1, Briscoe and Dillon at 100-1. I just put $4 combined on those 3 drivers. CJ went with Keselowski, put a few bucks on him. You put a couple of bucks each on Jones and Buescher. With Keselowski, he was 7th his last time out there. And, he's a veteran driver, and you do wonder whether or not he's going to get a win this year. So at 50-1, this is not a bad time to maybe go with him there. And then with Briscoe and Dillon, for Briscoe, it was really more of the fact that sort of like Blaney, I'm kind of surprised he hasn't worked yet for the Cup Series because he was excellent in the Xfinity Series at this racetrack, Chase Briscoe. So I am getting 100-1 on him. And Austin Dillon, runner-up in 2020, coming off a 10th place finish last week, 9th in this race last year, has 5 career top 10s, did well in the Xfinity Series, and just mentioned too, he finished 4th at Homestead, so that's not a bad idea. That's not a bad deal as well. And Jones and Buescher were 2 drivers I was also considering for long shots, but you took them, so that's good.
Yep, Jones, pick your stat. Plus, he won the Southern 500. And it wasn't necessarily, Kyle, Busch, and Truex had issues while they were leading and handed the lead to Jones, but he held them off, and he had to be there. He was 3rd, so he capitalized on those moves. It wasn't like he was 20th and found his way to the lead. He was 3rd. This is arguably one of his best tracks. You got 7 top 8 finishes in 10 tries, and you're getting them for good odds. So why not go his direction? I agree with Austin Dillon. As you said, he's good on age tracks. So is Buescher. Atlanta, he was good at. Fontana, he's been good at. He was 9th in both races in 2021. Granted, last year didn't have as good of luck, but RFK Racing was still trying to find their footing. They're much better at this time around. I say him and Keselowski, you might as well snag them both. Because I could see them potentially winning. As far as the Ford camp, that's probably your top 4 team because you're getting better odds than you are with the Penske's. So I like them. Couple longer shots. Michael McDowell, 7th and 6th last year on this track. So he's a pair of top 7. Justin Haley, 3rd in this race last year. So if you want to go a longer shot package, look their way. Stenhouse was 8th last year, but however, that's his only top 10 and 14 Darlington starts. I just don't know if he's going to win Daytona and Darlington in the same year. But if you want to go a longer shot package, there's some good guys out there that could potentially steal a win this weekend.
And a lot of those long shots really do need a good week, especially I mean, you look at it, Dylan, if he's going to have anything going on for him this season, he needs to have a good week. Haley only has a couple of top 10s. Jones only has a couple of top 10s, and then you mentioned McDowell, just one top 10. Even Corey LaJoie, the good season he's had, only has one top 10. Austin Cindric, 2 top 10s. There's a lot of drivers that have been disappointing. AJ hasn't had a top 10 since the 500. Ryan Preece does not have a top 10. It just goes on and on. I have been, though, we spoke about Gregson's battle on Sunday. The last couple of races, even though he hasn't finished well, he has shown. So something's starting to maybe percolate there for Noah Gragson, but the results are still not there. So,
yeah, that's something too. You got to look at, are they really going to jump out? And they've been that way all season. Are they just going to magically win? I just find it hard that you're going to go from that to victory lane, especially when all these guys we talked about have been pretty strong there. It's like not only that, you have to beat those guys. That's the other. Yes. You've got to actually beat them. That's what's hard to do.
It's not Daytona or Talladega. So.
Nope.
All right, so that's going to wrap it up. Don't forget to check out the website there, of course, racereviewonline.net. That's where you can check out all of our picks, the exact amount that we put for each pick. Same thing for the fantasy. That's already up there. For the futures, that's already up there. We'll talk more about that stuff when we have more time next week. Again, tomorrow, Eric will have his IndyCar report live from the racetrack. And then next week, we have, is that the All-Star race next week?
That's the All-Star race. Yep, Northwest.
All right. And then in 2 weeks, the big Sunday. And by the way, CJ is going to try to make that week, the week of the Coke 600. So it's, work for CJ, which is the reason why he's cut down to a couple of shows a year. But we talked about it. He's going to try to make it. So we'll see if we can get him on in a couple of weeks. Anyway, thanks for bucking health issues there, Eric. Appreciate it.
The good old stomach bug, but hopefully it's cleared and smooth sailing away.
Yes, and we'll talk to you hopefully in better form on this show next week, but I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Yep, sounds good.